Every single day, the modern world consumes around 100 million barrels of oil. It fuels the cars we drive, the planes we fly, the ships that carry goods across oceans, the factories that manufacture products, and the systems that keep modern civilization running. Yet the price of this single commodity can move dramatically in a matter of hours. Not because oil wells suddenly stop producing, not because global demand instantly changes, but because of a handful of shipping routes, a few decisions made by governments, and millions of trades taking place in financial markets. The oil market is one of the most complex systems in the global economy. It sits at the intersection of energy, geopolitics, technology, finance, and geography. And understanding how this system works reveals something fascinating about how the world really operates. Because oil is not just another commodity, it is the energy foundation of modern civilization. The scale of the oil market is difficult to comprehend. Every day, roughly 100 million barrels of crude oil are produced around the world. That oil travels thousands of miles through pipelines, across oceans on giant tankers, and into refineries where it is transformed into fuels, chemicals, plastics, and countless products used in everyday life. This vast global network connects producers in one part of the world with consumers in another. But here is the first surprising truth about the oil market. It does not operate like a normal market. Most goods are produced and consumed in roughly the same region, but oil is different. Huge quantities of oil must travel across the planet before they reach the places where they are needed, which means the global oil market depends not just on production, but on transportation. And that transportation system is surprisingly fragile, because enormous volumes of oil pass through a handful of narrow locations on the map. These locations are known as energy chokepoints, and they quietly control the flow of the world's most important commodity. One of the most critical of these chokepoints is the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow stretch of water lies between Iran and Oman, and connects the Persian Gulf with the open ocean. At its narrowest point it is only about 33 kilometers wide, yet every day around 20 million barrels of oil pass through this route. That is roughly 1/5 of the entire global oil supply, which means if this single passage becomes disrupted, the consequences ripple through global energy markets almost immediately. But Hormuz is only one part of the story. Another critical route is the Strait of Malacca. This shipping lane connects the Indian Ocean with the Pacific and is a major gateway for energy flowing into Asia. Countries like China, Japan, and South Korea depend heavily on oil shipments passing through this route. If this passage were blocked or restricted, tankers would be forced to take much longer routes around Indonesia, dramatically increasing shipping costs and delivery times. Further west lies another vital choke point known as Bab el-Mandeb. This narrow passage connects the Red Sea with the Gulf of Aden and forms a key link in the route between Europe and Asia. Oil moving from the Middle East toward Europe often passes through this corridor, and just beyond it lies one of the most famous trade routes in the world, the Suez Canal. This artificial waterway allows ships to travel between Europe and Asia without sailing around the entire African continent. Millions of barrels of oil and refined fuels pass through this canal every day. Then there are the Turkish Straits connecting the Black Sea with the Mediterranean. These narrow waterways allow oil from countries around the Black Sea region to reach global markets. Together, these choke points form the hidden arteries of the global oil system, and they reveal something critical about energy markets. Both oil supply is not just about how much oil exists underground. It is about how easily that oil can move from producers to consumers. which means geography plays an enormous role in determining how the global energy system functions. But geography alone does not determine oil prices. Politics plays an equally powerful role, because some of the world's largest oil producers coordinate their actions through an organization known as OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. Formed in 1960 by Iran, Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and Venezuela, OPEC was created to give oil-producing nations greater control over their natural resources. Before OPEC existed, a handful of Western oil companies dominated global production. Oil-producing countries often received relatively small shares of the profits. By working together, OPEC members aim to influence oil production and stabilize markets in their favor. Over time, the group expanded to include more countries, and today it works closely with several major producers outside the organization. This broader alliance is often called OPEC Plus. Together, these countries control a large share of global oil production, which gives them significant influence over supply. When the group decides to reduce production, global supply tightens. When they increase production, markets can stabilize or soften. These decisions are closely watched by energy traders around the world, because even small changes in global supply can have large effects on prices. But there is another layer to the oil market that many people never see: the financial market where oil is traded. Most oil prices you hear about on the news are not determined by physical barrels changing hands. They come from futures markets. These markets allow traders to buy and sell contracts for oil delivery at a future date. The two most important benchmarks are Brent crude and West Texas Intermediate. Brent serves as the primary reference price for much of the world's oil. WTI is the main benchmark used in North America. On major exchanges, these contracts are traded constantly by companies, investors, and financial institutions. Airlines hedge fuel costs. Oil producers lock in future prices. Investment funds speculate on market movements. The volume of futures trading is enormous, far larger than the amount of physical oil actually produced, which means financial markets play a significant role in shaping oil prices. And because futures markets are forward-looking, they reflect expectations about the future. If traders believe supply will tighten months from now, prices may rise today. If economic data suggests demand could weaken, prices may fall even before consumption declines. This is why oil prices sometimes react instantly to geopolitical events, economic reports, or policy decisions. The market is constantly trying to price what might happen tomorrow, but there is another powerful signal inside the oil market that professionals watch very closely: inventories. Around the world there are massive storage facilities holding crude oil. These storage systems act as buffers for the global energy market. When supply exceeds demand, oil goes into storage. When demand exceeds supply, those inventories are drawn down, which means the level of global oil storage reveals the true balance between supply and demand. Some of the most important storage hubs are located in places few people ever hear about. One of them is Cushing, Oklahoma. This small city serves as a key storage and pipeline hub for North American oil. It is also the delivery point for WTI futures contracts. Changes in inventories at Cushing can send signals to traders about the tightness of the market. Another major storage center lies in Rotterdam in the Netherlands. This port acts as a critical distribution hub for energy supplies moving across Europe. Across Asia, countries such as China, Japan, and South Korea maintain strategic reserves designed to protect their economies from supply disruptions. These reserves allow governments to release oil into the market during emergencies. Together, these storage systems provide a cushion for the global oil market, but they also reveal when the market is becoming tight. When inventories fall steadily, it signals that the world may be consuming oil faster than it is being supplied, and that is when prices often begin to rise. But supply itself is shaped by another critical factor: the cost of producing oil. Not all oil is equally easy to extract. Some oil fields can produce crude at very low cost. Others require complex technology and enormous investment. If you imagine the global oil industry as a pyramid, the cheapest oil sits at the bottom. Conventional oil fields in certain regions can produce oil relatively inexpensively because of favorable geology and established infrastructure. But as demand for energy has grown, producers have moved higher up that pyramid, into resources that are more difficult and costly to develop. These include deep water oil fields located thousands of meters beneath the ocean floor. Massive offshore platforms must operate in harsh conditions, requiring billions of dollars of investment before production even begins. Another major resource is shale oil. In the United States, advances in horizontal drilling and hydraulic fracturing unlocked huge quantities of oil trapped in shale rock formations. This technology transformed the United States into one of the world's largest oil producers. But shale production has different economics. Individual wells decline quickly, which means companies must continuously drill new wells to maintain output. That makes shale production highly responsive to price changes. When prices rise, drilling activity tends to increase. When prices fall, drilling slows down. Then there are oil sands resources, where crude oil is mixed with sand and clay. Extracting this oil requires energy-intensive processes that raise production costs. Each of these resources sits at a different point on the global cost curve, and that cost curve helps determine how much oil the world produces. When prices are low, only the cheapest resources remain profitable. When prices rise, more expensive projects become viable. Companies invest in exploration and development. New supply eventually enters the market. This dynamic creates cycles in the oil industry. High prices encourage investment. Investment increases supply, and increased supply can eventually push prices back down. But technology constantly reshapes this equation. Advances in drilling techniques, seismic imaging, and data analysis continue to unlock new resources and improve efficiency, which means the amount of recoverable oil is not fixed. It evolves over time, and that brings US back to one of the most common questions about energy. Will the world run out of oil? The answer is more complicated than many people expect. The challenge is not simply how much oil exists underground. The challenge is how much oil can be produced economically. As long as prices support investment and technology continues to advance, new resources can become viable, which means the oil market will continue evolving. What remains constant is the extraordinary complexity of the system itself. A system shaped by geography, geopolitics, technology, finance, and economics. A system that quietly powers modern civilization. And once you understand how these pieces fit together, you begin to see the oil market not just as a commodity market, but as one of the most fascinating systems in the global economy. If you found this interesting, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more deep dives into how global markets really work.